Okay, this is the Coast to Coast Combat Hour, take two. Ed Carbajal, as always, here without Matthew Hawkins. This week, filling in for Matt Hawkins is Michael Shepard, the other half of the Last Round podcast. This podcast is brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Please visit AllAccessMMA.com for your MMA fight news. All right, Mike, thank you for your patience, sir. Welcome back to round two of. Hopefully, this is the last round of this fucking recording. All right. Anyway, so we were talking. For folks that don't know, Mike is the other half of the Danny Zaldivar that comes on the podcast and updates us on boxing. So we were talking boxing updates and how boxing has been moving forward with Top Rank, Matchroom, and Showtime getting started, and fight bubbles and things like that. So if you don't mind just kind of doing a quick footnote of where we had left off before I decided to screw up the cables here.
So as we were saying, Top Rank kind of came back first, decided it would be the best idea to kind of base himself in one area. So they chose the MGM in Las Vegas. Obviously, they can have the fights downstairs. Everybody can stay in the hotel and keep themselves safe in the bubble, as everywhere seems to call it. Frank Warren also came back. He had a couple of Friday night shows. Matchroom came back last week with the Matchroom Square Gardens events that they've been doing in Eddie Hearn's home. The biggest stately home that he has there. They're going to do 4 shows this month. Showtime just came back. They decided to do the similar thing, that they'd base themselves in the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. They just announced a huge, I think, 16 fights on Fox, and I think 6 or 8 fights on Showtime. So, they've got a lot of fights coming up. But I think, as I said the first time, a lot of the boxing has been very domestic level fights. English against English, Americans against, kind of A side, B side, because of the lack of money generated due to no fans. It's kind of made it hard to really be able to afford the big fights. So, boxing's back, but to a certain extent, I would have said that really the UFC's come back, and some of the great fights they've put on. The Till fight, and obviously the Gaethje fight early on.
Yeah.
So, they've come back at a different level to boxing, I would have said.
Yeah, it helps that they jumped in first. I know Dana White was making it a point to be first, and it looks like it's paying off for them. I saw a report earlier today that Disney was reporting a huge number of subscribers for all their the ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, and the Hulu package. I know that combination probably has a lot to do with it, but from what I saw in the report, they said that the UFC was a big driver because people did want to see live sports. Outside of cornhole and everything else that's going on. But Top Rank is in that ESPN Plus subscription bubble. So I know we were talking about before my dumbass screwed up the first recording attempt that we were doing here. You mentioned how it's been like very domestic, and one thing Matt and I have talked about in previous episodes of the podcast, how we've seen like guys that were on the come up kind of get their a platform to make a name for themselves. I know Justin Gaethje. For me, Justin Gaethje doesn't fit in that bubble because I've been following him since his World Series of Fighting days. But we were talking before the recording got messed up. Khamzat Chimaev, obviously not someone folks heard of, but while the UFC was in Abu Dhabi, they brought him in and he fought twice in their short time there. So are you seeing that happen in boxing? Like a lot of regional or up and coming boxers getting sped through to the up the ranks to get their names out there?
Yeah, any of the fighters who stayed ready, they didn't take time off. So any of those guys can kind of jump on, because Joshua Franco, for example, someone tested positive for the coronavirus for a world title fight. He managed to step in on about a week's notice, ended up headlining the event, won the world title, and it was live on ESPN,
Nice.
So for just staying ready and being a local fighter, he managed to, it was really win-win. Now he's a world champion. He's 23, 24 years old, and he's headlined on ESPN, which is, I'm sure many fighters' dreams.
Yeah, man, and that's great to see. I mean, when a lot of folks, when casual fans that get into combat sports, whether it be boxing or MMA, they jump in on someone when they're already at their high point, so they don't know about the come up. And when it's crazy that I do want to write something on it. I just don't know how to, because we're still in this pandemic period, but there's like weird opportunity in the time of Corona. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like the boxers you just mentioned, Khamzat Chimaev is a perfect example. Justin Gaethje's interim title fight win is another example. Like, people weren't even thinking about him fighting Khabib, and now that's going to happen September, October. So it's just crazy how even with everything as bad as it is, I mean, it's almost a testament to pushing forward when people are telling you not to. It's either stay, be scared and afraid and don't do anything, or try something and see where success can be made. And I just think it's almost poetic that combat sports is the one that's doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just good because you have to take that risk, especially when you're working for someone like Dana White. I assume if you keep saying no, eventually there's going to be no offers. So really, you just have to bank on yourself, to get through this period, and then hopefully, bigger paydays will come down the line, because it's a solo sport. It's not a team sport where you can have other people carry you through. You're in there by yourself.
So let me ask you something. As a boxing person, a lot of fans like when I was on your podcast, I know I talked about how I used to follow boxing, before MMA kind of started taking my attention the way that it does now. I've always been a combat sports fan. I mean, being Mexican, my father boxed, so boxing is the original combat sport before rule sets changed and the definition of fighting changed and things like that. But for boxing, when you look at it in this day and age, you have Top Rank, you have Matchroom, Showtime. Like is there how like UFC's the front runner for MMA, like the premier US organization, or I mean, some would say globally, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, because I know One Championships tries to counter a lot of numbers. Everyone's got their own numbers to make themselves look good. So from your opinion, what would you say is who gives boxing fans the best boxing?
See, that's a Twitter debate that comes up, quite a lot of the time. I don't know. I mean, you've got the main ones. You've got Matchroom. Obviously, they do fights in the UK and the US, so they have big reach. A lot of different events going on. Probably one every weekend. But I think because of the fact that the boxers are spread throughout, that normally it takes two promotions to make those big fights.
Yeah.
Matchroom has Anthony Joshua, but his opponents are Deontay Wilder's at PBC, Tyson Fury's over there at Top Rank, and Frank Warren. So it's kind of hard to say, in the certain divisions, like the PBC has the majority of the welterweight division. Top Rank has some really good up-and-coming prospects, and like Teofimo Lopez, experienced guys like Vasyl Lomachenko. So there isn't really one that kind of stands out. Eddie Hearn is probably prominent because he does a hell of a lot of media. He talks really, really well. Whereas Al Heyman at PBC, he pays really well, has, the welterweight division pretty much on lockdown, but does zero media. You don't even really see him at ringside at events. So, yeah, I'm going to sit on the fence.
Well, I mean, it is a hard answer to. I mean, I know I asked the question, but I mean, when you look at how boxing and how fights are made, especially the big fights, like you said, it's there's something because obviously the MMA fights aren't made the same way boxing bouts are booked, because there's more negotiations and stuff that go on that MMA fighters can't do. So the answer is hard, because like when you have all these people involved, you look at it, it's hard to say, because they co-promote a lot, or there's a bunch of names on things. I know you mentioned PBC, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury, and Eddie Hearn. I know earlier in the year was talking about how they've worked something out to get them Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury in the ring. I haven't heard any updates on that, so I mean, if that's changed, has that changed at all? Is there any changes to that, or is it on pause because of COVID?
They both have fights they have to take. Before that fight, Anthony Joshua's got to fight Kubrat Pulev, I believe, in December.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking like Tyson Fury is going to have the third fight with Deontay Wilder, but Wilder's kind of been, away from social media, and people are kind of wondering whether he's got a bad injury because you haven't really heard much from him. But that's a fight that he has to take, and then there's also a mandatory that Tyson Fury may have to take against Dylan White because he's been waiting for about 3 years for a title shot. So there are a few things that need to fall into place for that to happen, and obviously that's the sort of event where you're going to need crowd because you're looking at probably somewhere in the region of 10 to 15 million in gate money for that sort of that sort of fight, unless they take it out to Dubai or Saudi Arabia and just get 100 million given to him by a sheikh out there. So
yeah. I mean, I think that's why the UFC likes, outside of it being beautiful and they had as far as COVID cases are concerned, they did all right out there when they had their month of fights in Abu Dhabi. And then they come back to Vegas and their 13 fight card went down to like an 8 fight card last week. But I think I saw that only happen on the top rank ones that were showing. I know that there was that one main event that got changed to the co-main event. I forget who it was.
Jamel Herring.
Yeah. That was like maybe early July, right?
He's actually got called off twice.
Oh wow.
He tested positive, went away, tested negative, came back to the rearranged fight, tested positive again, and then took a test the next day, and that came back negative. So I think the reliability of the tests is kind of a little bit fickle, it seems. So
yeah, it seems like that everywhere. I mean, with all the stuff you see in the news, and depending on what you read, that's one of the earlier top. I think that was a top rank card when that happened with Michaela Mayer, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, because I know she had to have her match postponed, and she went and got her own test immediately and was putting it all over social media, and was saying like these things aren't really reliable because I'm fine. So I don't know. I mean, still, but the numbers. I mean, the bubble idea seems to work though, because it doesn't look like it's happening that much. And I mean, who you had the ones you mentioned for boxing, the ones we know about in MMA. It's funny. I don't think anything. I forget they lost so many fights last weekend in the UFC. Bellator on their first Bellator 242, they only lost the one, the Steve Mowry bout. He tested positive, and so far this week it looks like they're all right. I know fighters are arriving at Mohegan Sun for Bellator 243, but which they're using the same bubble. We were talking about that before when we first tried to record this. Showtime and Bellator are both under the Viacom CBS banner. So Showtime Boxing and Bellator are flip-flopping the Mohegan Sun Arena as their bubble. Do you think, as far as buzz for who's watching what, because I know Dana White was knocking Top Rank, their ratings numbers on ESPN. Which boxing platform do you think is being watched more? Like, is there a lot of buzz behind Showtime's return with all the bouts they announced?
They seem to always attract decent sort of numbers, especially when they go to Fox, because Fox is just available in so many homes. Showtime's obviously behind a little bit of a paywall because you have to pay a little bit extra to get the Showtime stuff. I would probably say Showtime eventually will probably come out on top, because the Top Rank events are also, some of those are on the Plus, which is also, like $5 a month. The Matchroom shows were on DAZN, which is also behind a paywall. So I would have just thought that the Fox shows will probably end up with the best numbers. But I don't think we're going to see, decent sort of numbers until we get back to the point where we're getting, higher level fights. When you're getting those, those household names, the UFC doing good numbers because they're putting on good shows. They're putting on really stacked shows because, they can just kind of make fighters fight because they're all under one banner. So
yeah, but they are pulling guys out of like they had John Castaneda open up one of the cards. I think it was one of the Abu Dhabi cards. He was like the first fight on the last one. And he was on. Actually, it's funny. It's going to start in a few minutes. Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on there. He fought in Combate Americas. He fought on there, and they didn't sign him because he lost his belt, but he still got a call, which goes back to the opportunities that are lying, with the time that's happening and everything that's happening right now. But do you think? It like how hardcore do you have to be to consider a boxing card stacked? To draw in some real numbers. I mean, like obviously you guys like you and Danny and the folks I wrote with over at Front Proof Media, like if there's boxing on, you're gonna watch it anyway, right? But like how many what how do you draw in it? How do you draw in as much as people hate casuals? Like how do you draw those in? Because those are the numbers that drive numbers up, and obviously added revenue and everything comes up. Like what's a stacked card for boxing? That what do you think needs to happen to do you think that everybody kind of needs to make it easier to work together?
Sometimes I think it's just putting together different promotions, because obviously if you get like a lot of the top rank welterweights, for example, like Terence Crawford, the top rank welterweight, one of the best in the world, can't get an opponent because all the guys that he wants to fight are over at the PBC. They have that little phrase of, Terence Crawford's on the wrong side of the street because everyone he wants to fight is on the other side, but they just keep fighting each other and leaving Terence Crawford on the outside. And then kind of to answer that second part of that question is, I think for those, casual fans as they call them, or, the guys that really everyone wants to attract, because those are the guys that tune in just for the big fights. You need to have, fighters on the card like a Ryan Garcia, which people know at home because of all of his social media posts, a Triple G because, he just goes around knocking guys out. The people that promotions, push, people that are always on there, for the little clips like Anthony Joshua, the Tyson Furies, people that talk well. Like a Conor McGregor, for example, like he always gets that promotional push, and then when he does the press conferences, he just lights the room up, and whoever he fights, it's a main event. It's a spectacle in itself. A Conor McGregor fight weekend is completely different to any other fight weekend. I've been to a few McGregor fights. The Diaz 2 fight, I was there for that. It's just completely different. It's a different buzz.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some people just have the gift and some don't. But because it's weird. Because like, what do you think? Like, there's folks that argue that maybe some boxing. I mean, I know that not every boxing bout is a 12-rounder. You've got 8 rounds, you got 10 round stuff going on. But like, what do you think the drive behind that is? Is that an experience thing, or is it because they want to move the card along? Like, do you think they should shorten matches? Because like the Wilder Fury, the last one, I mean, I thought that was exciting from the beginning to, well, I mean, it both of them, even the one that went the distance, like I just thought they were exciting from beginning to end. So I mean, what do you think? Is it go back to styles make fights, or what's your opinion?
The bout length kind of really goes hand in hand with experience. When a guy first comes out of the amateurs or just first turns pro, he'll do 4 3-minute rounds. Eventually, he'll go up to 6, up to 8, up to 10. And then obviously, once he reaches 12, he really won't ever come back down to anything less than 12. I think the problem you have in boxing is that everybody kind of wants to make as much money as they can, taking the easy fights before they take a big fight, because the money drops so much. If he's there making 100,000 a fight, and then eventually he loses and gets a loss on his record, he may come back to make 16,000, 20,000 a fight, which, after taxes, he's looking at half of that. And he may only fight, 1, 2, 3 times a year. So that's the problem you have to look at. Sometimes you look at it with your fan hat on, and then you take that off, and you have to look at it with your business hat on. You know, like if you were managing this guy, or if you actually were this guy, you know, like, are you going to take a harder fight for a little bit more money, or are you going to take a fight which is easy? You may knock him out, you may look good, and you're guaranteed another fight at another good pay. Whereas if you take the fight that the fans want, and it's a bigger and it's a harder fight, and it's a 50-50 fight, you may lose, you know, good 60% of your purse in the next fight, because you've now got that loss in your record. Because, like everyone says, losses in boxing is completely different to a loss in MMA. If you've got a few losses in MMA, that people just look at like, oh, he's had a good career because he's fought hard fighters. I don't know whether it's that Mayweather effect, because he always used to go on about that. Oh, and you drive into Vegas and it has 51-0. Just as you get into Vegas, you know, he's still showing that record off. So it needs to get to a point where maybe the boxing fans look at things a little bit more in the MMA style and realize that, you know, he's got a loss, but that loss was to, you know, one of the greatest of all time, you know, one of the greatest in that division, and it shouldn't affect his pay as greatly as it does. But I'm sure promoters like that, though, you know, so they don't have to pay the guys much. So
yeah, I mean, on one side it's probably a bargaining chip for promoters, but like you said, it would be nice if sports fans in general could be more objective. I mean, you know, it's always you always see that meme online of like the heavy set dude talking about, oh, his cardio sucks, and you know, it's a meme of like a fat dude eating cookies and stuff, and it's sad because that's, you know, that is kind of true. Those people are out there.
We're all guilty of it at times, though. You know, I'll find myself saying stuff to the TV, and I sit there and I think, I couldn't do that.
Yeah,
you do get drawn into it, you know, to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'll say when I was younger, I was guilty of it, but you know, I do train myself and stuff. I mean, I'm a hobbyist. Even with fighters that we've had on this podcast that I've interviewed, you know, when I talk to them about it, I'm just like, you know, like they'll say, oh, you know, they're like, oh, I didn't know you got a black belt, so you understand. And I'm like, yeah, but not really. I don't understand at your level, because you guys are different animals. You know what I mean? So even though I do have a black belt, and I might outrank some of the fighters I've interviewed, they're still different. It's just a different breed of human. Their mindset is different. So as a hobbyist, I make my best effort to understand them. So I think that's something that folks just need to kind of like, you know, even if you don't plan on sticking with it, just go feel that pressure for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, do 3 rounds of boxing and feel that exhaustion of trying to keep up output for 3 rounds, and see if you can attack as much as you're yelling when you're watching it at home. Yeah. But that's just my opinion. I know not everyone thinks that way or whatever, but yeah, like you said, it's you know, we all have half hats. I say there's the objective, and then there's the fan hat, and you know, sometimes one weighs more than the other. Speaking of it, being a fan and stuff, how did you? Can you just talk about how you and Dan? I mean, we've never asked Danny, so like, how did you guys start off with your podcast the last round? Like, what was the spark? I mean, did you and Danny like bump into each other and have the same boxing T-shirt on or something, or how did that happen?
So I actually met Danny at a Fantasy Springs casino in India. We went to a Golden Boy event, and you know, I was just kind of sat near him and just kind of started talking. And then he used to do a radio show. I can't remember the name of it now. Southern California.
Yeah, I remember that. It was on NBC Sports for a little bit.
Yes, the Southern California Boxing Show or something like that. It's something similar to that.
Yeah.
And then I used to do a podcast with somebody else. And then it got to the point where I was kind of, you know, hoping to push things with the podcast and, you know, get like, you know, bigger interviews and stuff like that. And then I saw that Danny's, you know, show had stopped. I think financially they couldn't afford to do it anymore, so they stopped doing it. And then I saw him at a local show, a Thompson's Boxing Show, and I just kind of, you know, said to him, I was like, hey, you fancy doing a podcast together? And then we just went from there. We kind of had the idea, and then for a few months we decided that, you know, when we were going to hit the scene, we wanted to get, you know, a good intro, a good outro, you know, make sure we had a good logo created and everything. So, you know, kind of
a great logo. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because obviously you only, like the old saying, you only get one first impression. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure when people first saw us that like everything was kind of legit. You know, people thought it was more than just two guys just doing it. So we did it. It was the weekend of Canelo Triple G. The first one was when the show first went out. We just thought that would be a good weekend to kind of start it, and then it's kind of just grown and evolved from there. Really, just hopefully we've got better with experience. Luckily we put the work in and get some good guests on. Everyone from Eddie Hearn to Andy Ruiz, Sergio Martinez, Maravilla. We've had him on. Everybody, Tom Loeffler, Mikey Garcia. So many that I forget. That really, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, you guys have been killing it, and it's the only boxing podcast that I listen to, and I know we were talking about it before we started recording. I usually listen to podcasts when I drive, so I'm behind on my podcasts. So I'm like around June, where I'm caught up to now. But I mean, you guys, like you said, you've had Eddie Hearn on a few times, like a couple times. You've had Andy Foster, CSAC executive director Andy Foster, on, who works a lot with the UFC, and I mean his name pops up a lot in MMA news.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've actually used your podcast as a citation for a couple of articles when I've written about his thoughts on things over at MMAnews.com. So you guys are definitely putting in the work. So for folks listening to this podcast, if you're into boxing and you want some really objective, open audio content for boxing, the Last Round is definitely where it's at. It's funny when you talk about how you started with Danny. I've mentioned it when Danny's been on this podcast before, but I don't know if I know I probably mentioned it to you in private, but the original concept of Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour was with Danny and I way back when we met each other, back when we wrote at we used to contribute when we wrote a lot of combat sports content at a site that is no longer with us. So, but he and I kept in touch, and our work schedules and the different coasts made it hard to keep a committed schedule. So I'm glad that you guys are able to keep something committed, and I mean the socials on point. You guys got that little audio wave thing on your post, so you get to sample some of it. I don't get to do enough of that because of all my other duties at the websites that I contribute to. So I'd like to market this podcast a little more like that, but we have a decent following too. But I mean, it just goes to show you, man, if you're committed, discipline, martial arts, discipline, it doesn't have to be in fighting. As long as you stay committed and keep going, growth happens, and you guys have definitely grown. Is there any like dream guest that you would like to have? When do you who would you like to have as a guest from the boxing world? I mean, you've had some pretty big ones already, but is there one that you're like, I can't get them, not yet, like because you're not big enough? Or
that's a great question. I'm trying to think, because obviously there's some boxers, I love Roberto Duran, but he doesn't speak English. So for me, that wouldn't be a great interview. An in-depth interview, with like Mike Tyson. Roy Jones Jr. was someone else I really enjoyed watching coming up. Prince Nazim. They're not all very good interviews, I've heard from people. But, if you got them on the right day at the right time, and to really get, like an in-depth interview of their career from the beginning, I think would be really interesting. I'd also love to do one on Emmanuel Augustus.
Mm-hmm.
He's the drunken master, as they used to call him. He had a crazy career just from start to finish. So someone like him would be great to interview. Mickey Ward, I'd like to do Mickey Ward as well. So there's a handful of different ones for different reasons.
Hey, there's a chance you could get the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. obviously, because they're matched up for September 12th out in your neck of the woods. So
yeah, we do get like a lot of PR companies reaching out and offering us different fighters. So fingers crossed. I'd jump at the chance, like I said, to interview both of them, even for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I would reach out. The League, what is it called? League of League of Legends is
League of Legends, I believe. Yeah.
yeah, or Legends Only League. I'm sorry, it's Legends Only League. Yeah, they have a website, man. Definitely check them out because I reached out to them and they replied. So I'm hoping to get something soon. I mean, those two names right there, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. We were at. If Matt and I have talked boxing since Danny was last on, we obviously talked about that because that's one. I mean, I know it's they're up there in age and stuff like that, but like Matt and I were both went on record like, yeah, we don't agree with it. Maybe they shouldn't be doing it, but we still kind of want to watch it. So, what's your take on that matchup?
I kind of agree. Both of them were fighters I really enjoyed watching coming up. Would you want to watch two 50-year-old people fight in the street? Not really.
Yeah.
I know they have the name recognition, and I just don't understand it. How does an exhibition fight? It doesn't go. Like, you can't have an exhibition fight. It's either a fight or it's not a fight. I understand, it's going to be a little bit of sparring and stuff like that, and it's be interesting to watch. But is it going to be one of those things where you, for example, remember when Tito fought Chuck at the Golden Boy show, and Tito got in there, and it was just like watching an old
that was rough.
beaten body. Tito just went in there and destroyed him, and you're going to get two of Chuck Liddells fighting each other.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to roll back the years. If anything, it may be you sat there and you're just looking at the ring, thinking to yourself, like, oh my God, like, these guys used to be the best in the world. They're both in decent shape. I take that. And, those short 20-second, 30-second clips of Tyson on the pads, you can maybe able to do it for 30 seconds, but, it's not the Tyson of old. And, some things are better left, left back in the day instead of coming back in. And because they're both going to regret it, eventually when people are watching it and it's nowhere near like they were in the prime. But it's payday, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that about the 30 seconds on the pads. I mean, that's what that was my take when we brought it up a couple episodes ago. Everyone looks good in the gym in the training room when you're practicing something, but once it's against a live opponent, and Roy Jones, even though they're both retired now, Roy Jones still has competed more recently than Mike Tyson has. It was actually on UFC Fight Pass his last bout in 2018, I believe. But I mean, if you were to take do an analysis of it, what's your you have a pick for that match? Or
if you're going back to their styles back in the day, obviously it's one of those fights where Mike Tyson's going to have to get up on the inside like he always did, because he was a shorter heavyweight, and just kind of his style. And Roy Jones is just going to be fleet of foot, keep him on the end of the jab, not let Tyson come in and come in with those huge hooks and those huge uppercuts that he's so good at doing. Tyson back in the day was excellent at just combination punching, just the way that he rocks his body from side to side, set up those hooks from different angles, just because his rotation of his body was so good and he was so powerful, so explosive. But he's not going to have that at 53, 54 years old. But I think, listening to Andy Foster and some of the stuff that have gone through, it looks like that it's going to be, I think, 12-ounce gloves. So, bigger gloves, no head guards. Then I think if anyone starts to bleed or starts to, get wobbled, I believe that referee Ray Corona, a local referee from here, who I believe's got the fight, is just going to stop it because of, California don't want to be in there, with the death of Mike Tyson or the death of Roy Jones Jr. because they've let 50-year-old ex-professionals fight. So,
do you think? I mean, I always have to play devil's advocate when you look at stuff, approaching like that. Do you think something happens where they don't get cleared medically and it just gets the rug pulled from under it?
Probably not, because unfortunately, money makes the world go round, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of money in that if anything did come up, unless it was very, very, very serious, that I'm sure they would get cleared somehow, some way. And it's just interesting to see whether are they just, because is it for charity? I believe there's a portion of it is going to go to charity, and the rest is probably just going to be pocketed by Roy Jones and Mike Tyson. But then who's going to follow? Because obviously they've made this promotion, and it looks like we're going to get regular Vander Holyfield,
Yeah.
James Toney may come back. Crossover fights as well, it looks like. So
I know the Legends Only League is supposed to be not targeted for combat sports, though. They do have a YouTube channel and on their website, and so there's I haven't checked it out since the announcement, but there's 2 videos. There's the one promoting that event, that matchup, and then just promoting the company itself. And it looks like it's supposed to be a place for athletes that have retired but still think they got one left in them for something. So, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like maybe retired basketball players playing against each other or something. But it looks like that the whole thing is just to kind of give these guys another opportunity to do something, and it's going to be it usually will be for charity or something like that. So I don't know, man. I just feel like it's kind of cool to see that because as you and I both know, especially in combat sports, when guys say they retire, we usually see them again, not long after that, until they're really retired. So I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll see something more from there outside of combat sports. But in that sense, I kind of hope it's successful, but I might catch a little heat for that too. So I don't know. Are you against? Are you an ageist? Are you an anti-old person?
I don't mind, if they're coming back and they're doing, like 3-on-3 basketball, like no one's going to get, terribly hurt. It's when you see the frail, aged body of, fighters stepping back into the ring because, they just need the money. It's not a pleasant sight when you can remember them in their prime.
Yeah.
And they're knocking fools out and, just making other guys look silly, but yet they've, haven't been clever with their money, and then they're stepping back through the ropes. And, like when, Roy Jones Jr. was, knocked out a couple of times in like Russia and places like that. He was one of my favorites growing up. It's, it's not a nice sight to see. Chuck Liddell, like I touched on before, same thing for him. That wasn't a pleasant sight to see when, he was one of the guys I watched when, UFC first kind of, exploded onto the scene, with him and Tito taking over. So in other sports, yeah, completely, come back and compete. But sports where you can get, hurt when you're young, and then, 20, 30 years later, there's even bigger chance of, something terrible happening to you. So,
yeah. So we'll see what happens, I guess. I mean, it's a weird time to try to start something new. That's for sure with the COVID-19 situation. But we're coming close to the end of the time here. So I know for MMA, most of the followers of this podcast know that we got this weekend coming up is Bellator 243. It's another UFC on ESPN Plus. What's coming up for boxing this weekend?
Another Eddie Hearn card this weekend. Terry Harper and Natasha Jonas, 2 British female fighters fighting for the first time for the WBC female title. First time 2 British fighters have ever done that, female fighters. They're on that card. They have a few more domestic fighters on there. Chris Bellum-Smith is on that card. Hopi Price is on that card. Some really good up-and-coming fighters for people that follow the British scene. So it's not too bad a card, same sort of thing. It's not up there with the UFC, but, domestic level fighters and for people that just need to get their fix of people getting punched in the face, it'll fulfill that.
Cool. So what do you guys have coming up as far as your podcast? Let folks know where they can hear you, when you guys usually put out new episodes and things like that, social handles.
Social handles for Twitter and Instagram, it's at The Last Round 12. And then, we release it every Monday. And then we also sometimes will release a bonus podcast, if we get offered a fighter to interview during the week, or if, we're just off work and we have some free time, we'll throw in a few bonus episodes. And then when the world gets back to normal, something different that I think that me and Danny do is, when we're at events, we'll take our equipment and, we'll sit ringside and, we'll jump on guests when they're there and release podcasts, live at the event, which, I think sets us apart from everybody else. You don't really get too many podcasts that do that. So,
yeah, it's kind of hard to do. Especially, I know when I cover MMA at events, they're usually wrangling us somewhere. So it's kind of hard. I've seen folks try to do it and had not have success, but I like the idea. Maybe I can be the successful one with it, but we'll see. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Folks that follow this podcast can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter. I forget the Instagram one because I don't screw around on Instagram because I'm an old man. And we're on Anchor for the audio at Spotify. Just search Coast, the number 2 Coast Combat Hour. And also, you can always find the video version over at allaccessmma.com. Once again, Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, filling in for Matt Hawkins. Hopefully, he listens to this while he's out in Idaho picking potatoes or whatever the hell he's doing.
No worries there. Thanks for inviting me. And anytime you need someone to come in and talk about boxing, I'll be available.
Appreciate it, man. The invite is open as always for you and Danny. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. All right.